Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said the United States is proposing a trilateral format for the Ukraine peace talks that could take place in Miami shortly. Zelensky has added that the main parties involved in such a meeting, a joint meeting, will be the US, Russia and Ukraine, but some European delegates could also possibly be present. Let's listen in.
Що стосується мирної угоди, Умєров мав вчора розмови, всі більші деталі у мене буде трішечки сьогодні пізніше. Дійсно, Сполучені Штати Америки сказали, що у них буде окрема зустріч з представниками Росії, і вони запропонували такий формат, наскільки я розумію, Україна, Америка, русські, ну так як там є і представники Європи, напевно, і Європи.
The Ukrainian president has rather expressed skepticism on this trilateral format of talks, saying he is not very sure that anything new could come out of it. But Zelensky still has reiterated some of his previous comments, saying he believes yet that only the United States is capable of persuading Russia to end the ongoing war, and that there could be no alternatives to replace the US as the principal peace negotiator in Russia-Ukraine talks. Meanwhile, Russian President's special envoy Kirill Dmitriev has reportedly arrived in Miami, where he is scheduled to meet Trump's US President's special envoy Steve Witkoff and son-in-law Jared Kushner. And I now request Dr. Chadha to join us back in the discussion here. She is an associate professor of international relations in Kyoto. Thanks for staying on with us, Dr. Chadha, once again. How do you respond to Zelensky's statement that's come out? Do you agree that a trilateral talk involving all three parties and the negotiator is really going to be helpful at all?
Well, thank you again for having me to discuss this very important issue. I mean, see, we need to look at it from two perspectives, right? One is what President Zelensky is expressing as his anxiety of what could happen in the future. And the other one is his immense trust and confidence in the United States being able to negotiate a peace deal. So let's address, why he thinks US. I mean, if you look at both in terms of intent and capabilities, US currently stands as the only international mediator that could potentially bring this conflict to an end. One could only guess, whether it's going to be a permanent end to the conflict or a break for a timing, but at least United States, has maintained its position on this war as to, it needs to end sooner. And, and US is planning to act as the guarantor of peace too, in that regard. And then thirdly, the aspect of, US wanting to reduce its own financial and military burden, because, we've seen that US has consistently provided support to Ukraine in its time of need. Now, the question is, why is President Zelensky so skeptical when it comes to this? I mean, it seems like if you follow what he's been saying for a long time, he's been wanting a defining end to the war. He wants a very dignified peace wherein, he wants to hold Russians accountable. He wants return of abducted citizens. He wants legally binding US security guarantees. And also he does not want to give up the land. Yeah. And if you look at the President Trump peace plan, pretty much, a lot of disagreement that he still has is on what part of Donbas region would be under Russian control, or what part of the acquired territories would continue to be under the Russian control. And that is one thing I think that holds him to take a step back from his full commitment to the Trump peace plan. Now, him thinking that this trilateral format might or might not work largely stems from this anxiety as to whether or not, Ukraine could really push President Putin to, accepting any more difficult terms than Russia would be willing to accept. Because ultimately, if you look at it, it's ultimately going to be, again, a discussion between the United States and how much leverage US can have over Russia, or vice versa, in terms of agreeing the terms of peace. So why he thinks US can persuade Russia? I mean, precisely because, US has the economic and military weight, which currently Ukraine does not have. Yeah. And he thinks that Putin, or President Putin, might really feel the pressure if US puts its foot down and asks for, I don't know, if US is willing to respond with something like total sanctions, or some sort of a military advancement, some sort of a military weight within Ukraine in order to push Russia back or in order to deter Russia from further military action. So I think those are the combination of things that President Zelensky is probably looking at when he says that trilateral format might not work. However, he feels US is in a position to negotiate better with Russia.
Yeah, but if we've, for anybody who's been tracking the developments as far as the talks are concerned, they would tell you that Trump's approach has constantly been swinging, to either sides. So even if he's, not sure about Trump really, pushing forth Ukraine's demands, as has recently been seen with the statement that he's running out of patience with Ukraine and asking Zelensky to hold polls. But at least there's European Union. At least, that those members from the European Union states in the negotiations would only speak for Zelensky. If that is the case, then odds are rather in favor of Zelensky. So we don't know why should he be in fear of talks going the Ukraine way.
It's a good question that you raised, but let's understand the reality. The EU, even though it has been united and has put a united front in favor of Ukraine against Russia, there has been little that has come out in terms of lasting peace. And, in the past few years, specifically since this conflict started in February 2022, the only time we've seen Russia and Ukraine kind of trying to agree close to, 80% of what could be the future peace future peace process or the future peace deal, what it could look like, is a result of what President Trump had earlier, tabled, which meant even though there would be, security guarantees, and yet Russia would be allowed to keep certain territories, and they could use it as a economic buffer zone, so on and so forth, which President Zelensky is not very happy about. So in none of these do we see coming out of purely European negotiation. It is precisely because US is stepping into this role of being a negotiator, is stepping into this role of talking it out, diplomatically rather than with any other force, though, one could argue that economic sanctions are force enough, but we've seen economic sanctions alone have also failed to work. So given in light of that, I think President Zelensky is sounding more, I would say, pragmatic when he says that probably if it were to be left alone to Europe, we don't know how long it would take. It could end up in peace, but we don't know how long it would take. And at this point, US seems to be President Zelensky's best bet. That is, if President Trump were to be able to do a dialogue that allows somehow Russia to accept giving up the territories it has controlled, though that is a big question mark as it stands.
Fair, sure. Thank you very much, Dr. Chadha, for joining us in this discussion.